everyone. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. So today we're going to be talking about traditional and Montessori schools. Okay, so I wanted to touch base of the history of traditional schools. Where did it start off? Because education has been part of our system, part of us for a very long time. So the beginning started when we were settled in Jamestown. The first settlement was in Jamestown, Virginia. And then when towns became more populated, if a town had 50 households, they were required to provide a elementary school. And this was in 1947. Then in 1770, we're kind of really jumping down. The Quakers first opened up the first school for enslaved and free Black people. At the beginning, there was no schools for teachers to get the proper training until 1839, when the first one was opened. Now, I wanted to talk about a couple acts and court cases that are important. So, the first one is National School Lunch Act, and this allowed for the food to be much less, and it created a larger population of families to be able to send their kids to school, because at the time school was only meant for richer families that could afford for children to go to school and not have to work. A big court case, which I know probably most of you have heard or just know the name, is Brown versus Board, and this is where they ruled for separate but equal was unconstitutional, and this began the process of schools being more integrated and not separate. Another important act is the Individual and Disability Act, which was signed by George W. Bush, and this allowed for interventions for children with disabilities. It could be special, it could, not be special, it could be learning disabilities, physical disabilities, mental disabilities, and so on and so forth. So they were able to get accommodations for that. Another big one that happened in 2001 was No Child Left Behind Act. And this is where states would get more funding if they had a based test in their schools. Now, during President Barack Obama's running, he actually allowed states to waive against this because it was not doing the thing it was meant to do. It was making schools more difficult, and children were not getting what they needed. So now we're going to look at the history of Montessori schools. Excuse me. So, Marie Montessori was born on August 31st, 1870, and she graduated from University of Rome with a medical license. She was a doctor. After her graduation, she volunteered at the university and observed and studied children that were deemed as idiots or children with disabilities. This was mental and physical once again. When she was doing her observation, she started to look to these students as not just a scientist, but as an educator, and she saw something that she could do to change their experiences in their learning. So she was given an opportunity to open up a child center, and the name of it, translated in English, is the Children's House, and this was because her method is so around the children and what they are enjoying into doing with their education. Also, if you look at pictures, it's glass, so people can see what's happening in the inside, and the kids can see the outside of the nature and kind of bring those two together. So she first wrote her book called The Montessori Methods, and this began a whirlwind of new ideas in Italy. Once it was translated into English, over, I think it was 5,000 copies were sold in 4 days in the United States. And this became a big whirlwind in United States, and over 100 schools opened up in less than 3 years. But unfortunately, that was very short period of time. When World War I happened and language barriers became a problem, and also William Kilpatrick's critiques of her book, they kind of made all the schools close, and try to wipe out Montessori schools until 1950, when Nancy McCormick got a hold of her book and went to go see her in Italy, or in Paris, and she wanted to bring Montessori back to the United States. And it got back to the United States in around 1960, and that's when the American Montessori Society began, and over 5,000 Montessori schools were part of the United States. And this serviced children from infancy to adolescence. So, what is the Montessori method? Well, it's using a lot of hands on activities, a lot of student led learning, and it can create a very independent environment for children to be able to take their learning to wherever they feel they're interested in and want to pursue in. It also allows for a collaboration of one-on-one small groups and, like I said before, student-led learning. They are all age-appropriate activities. You're not going to see someone doing calculus in first grade. The teachers make sure that they are on track and doing the correct things that they need for development. Also, a big thing is the classrooms are a mixed age. Unlike in traditional schools, you're 9, you're in that grade, 10, 11, 12, you're in 5th grade, 4th grade, so on and so on and forth. Whereas their classes are between around the range of 3 to 4 years. This allows for children to be taught by older kids and the younger children being able to use them as a model of learning. There's no standardized test and grades in schools, and this is because they have such different paths that how are you going to be able to test them? Even though they do the maths and reading and writing, some kids might go more in depth than one, and they don't need grades. They show what their experience and their own learning. I wanted to touch base on hands-on activities through the eyes of child development. Now, looking at Piaget's cognitive development theory, in his first stage is sensory motor stage. It's where children or infants from birth to around 3 or 4, they are just using everything around them. They're using their hands, their eyes, their ears, their mouth to figure out their environment around them. And you can see that happening in Montessori classrooms. I found a couple videos where they display a infant program, and you can see the younger kids working on their balance and their walking, their stairs, and everything is to their level as well, so it helps them. And then the older kids in that classroom are working on more skills of fine motor. They're putting cups where they're supposed to be if they're having lunch. So we're really working on those fine motors of picking up things. Another thing in Piaget's cognitive development, which is his second stage, is preemptive stage, and this brings make-believe play in place. And Montessori really addresses that, and they have stations where kids are able to use costumes and props, and this doesn't only just help their creative side, but it also helps them collaborate with other children and understand a story and going through steps. So there is always some drawbacks in some of these learning theories. So one of them, like I stated, William Kilpatrick wrote criticisms about her book, and he stated that the children had too much independence. He didn't like that the teachers really took a step back and observed the children and helped them when they needed. He didn't like that. He wanted what they already had, is a teacher in front of the children talking to them for 6 hours straight. He also said that there's too much independence and you need to give that back to the teacher. Looking at some newer drawbacks is their structure is too open-ended. And this is because they are allowed to do what they want during the day. And some people might not enjoy that structure. Another big thing is they're not accessible for everyone, and this is because of expenses as well. But it's not open to lower income parents who are in poverty levels. And I wanted to share with you, if I can find it, the tuition for a kindergarten program from this year, 2019 to 2020. The cost is $9,102 or $930.20 a month. And this is from Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. And as the child gets older, the price gets older because it's more advanced. They're doing different activities. And if you wanted to send your child from birth to 18 years old, that's a heavy duty tuition. So not everyone can afford that. And they do try in working with different scholarships, and they try to make programs where it's integrated into the classroom, like in traditional schools, but it's still not as accessible as one would like. So I wanted to touch base on some of the benefits of each school and what type of student would benefit. So first, I want to point out that both special ed children can fit into both. Some children might need the more hands-on and free-willing classroom, as Montessori advise or gives in the repetitive notions that might help a lot of children who have autism, where they need to do something over and over again to understand it. And then traditional schools have the special ed programs where they are protected, they get the intervention, they get the accommodations they need, they get the devices, and like I said before, they're protected. And then some children need a structure. They need something. They need someone to tell them what to do. And in Montessori schools, it might not be always there. They might have to go and show them why they need this help. So that's the two differences that I wanted to touch base on, some of the benefits. So my last big thing that I did was comparing the two. And I used a article said Montessori versus traditional education in the public sector, seeking appropriate comparison of academic achievement. And they used two tests, a math test and a reading test. And I want to point out that they needed to acknowledge the fact that Montessori schools don't have standardized tests. They don't have grading. So they needed to give them the practice tests as traditional schools would already have and understand the questions and understand the the skill sets of taking a test before they were able to even look at it. So this helped kind of close in the gap that could have been happening. But in this, they came to realize that Montessori schools scored higher in both math and reading. They did it for 3 years and they tested them in their math. They scored higher in the second and third year, and the gap grew even bigger. And then in the reading test, their score had a significant difference between them. Most of the time, there's like a little slope, and you can see where everything is placed. And I just wanted to point out before I end this is education doesn't have a set place. You're not like, all right, this person goes right here. You need to figure out what works for you, what worked for your child. That might be a Montessori school, that might be other learning styles, or just going back to the traditional school, the public schools. But you always have the option of making sure you have the best education you need. And I wanted to also include my references. There are a lot. I'll pause it. I also want to just say thank you for listening to me ramble about school. even though we're already in it. Thank you and have a great day.